Back with you on the Newsfeed PM, and thanks for staying on. A new research report released in partnership with the Black Management Forum and Henley Business School has found that B-BBEE remains vital to economic transformation, but in its current form, it is failing to impact business performance. The report, titled "The Perceived Impact of Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment on Business Performance in South Africa," surveyed over 500 managers to gauge the real-world impact of transformation policies. For more on this, we're joined by BMF Managing Director, Monde Ndlovu. Kacheni, good to have you, and thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you, my brother, for hosting us as the BMF.
Is it even a fair question, or in other instances, is it a conscious question? Because the ANC would say, well, those who ask this question, they lack consciousness, to ask whether B-BBEE is still relevant in transforming the economy.
Yeah, I think for starters, I mean, we are dealing with perceptions, and perceptions therefore shape behavior, and behavior shapes certain decisions, etc. So the question is still important to ask because of who you are targeting, because we're not targeting the whole country, so to speak, in terms of the research, but we're targeting actual managers, those who are responsible for day-to-day responsibility of executing strategy of business. Yeah. So we wanted to get some insight into that because a similar study was done with Kruger in 2011. So we replicated that and added, a few more elements to the report as well. And so it's very important to gauge that firstly. Secondly, where in management are these people sitting? These are executives, so between ExCo and board, the report will tell you about 41% there. And so when you look at then those numbers, you can tell that the people who we were targeting are decision makers. Right. And so we need to engage decision makers. What is their perception? Not necessarily the financial performance of their business, but look at their perception around how B-BBEE may impact business performance broadly. So the question, therefore, remains relevant, especially to those that have their levers on management and making day-to-day decisions.
Yes, I think that qualifies very, very, very important, because you'll have Institute of Race Relations or even the Democratic Alliance coming to say, well, people are no longer interested in race-based policies. They just want to know, I can get a job, I can get food at a cost-effective price, and there's fuel, there's electricity. That's what they're interested in. But it's important to say you are now talking to actually people who are running businesses and asking them whether they think this policy is still relevant. What have they seen has been the impact of this transformation policy?
So firstly, I mean, they've made it clear that it's still critical. Transformation is, still critical to the economy. B-BBEE is still very much critical. The issue is its implementation and some of the issues that have come out there. So secondly, there's been some low perceptions across some of the measures that we measured. But B-BBEE perceived more positively on sales, access to market, human development, and staff morale. Yeah. So there's a bit more positivity there. Another interesting thing that's coming out there is that perceptions were more positive amongst highly compliant firms and historically disadvantaged managers, so black managers specifically. So it's very important that compliance piece, because even in the research, when you look at it, and we stayed there, the different compliance levels as well. There are others that are non-compliant at all, about 9.1%. That is a high number, right? And the B-BBEE Commission itself would have a massive list of non-compliant organizations. So you have the compliance piece, which is very important, which then tells you the mindset of senior leadership in the business. So we clearly could see that where B-BBEE is perceived better is where there's high compliance of the business, which means they're doing something right from an implementation perspective. Right. So those that are non-compliant actually should take a leaf from those that are compliant and have a proper discussion. And in fact, that comes out in one of the key recommendations in terms of deepening stakeholder engagement around these things. So that's very, very important to state. Structural failures also came about. We know about corruption and fronting. Right? And that is coming out with conversations with the commission and other in terms of fronting. So how do we tighten up fronting? So for the mere fact that there's a fronting issue, it means there's a gap in monitoring and evaluation. as well. And again, that comes out in a governance recommendation at the end in terms of this report. Tick box, right? So the manager is also saying there's a lot of tick box exercises.
What do they mean by that? In fact, I wanted to ask you that question. This
Yeah.
current tick box mode of implementation. What is exactly is the expectation? What are you ticking? What are the boxes that if you tick these, you're fine, then you can just keep going?
So that's the thing, to say that if we look at structure anyway in business, right, where you do get financial goals, there's organizational goals, etc. But for some reason, when we start talking transformational goals, then the debate of, oh, it's just a tick box exercise. So you've got to zoom in there to say, what exactly is the issue about ticking the box of successfully implementing transformation? Yeah. Of course, you will tick, just like you tick Monday, you must perform this way as managing director. If you don't, these are the consequences, right? So the same with transformation in terms of the system of monitoring its performance, because it has to perform. Yeah. And so there will be tick box, right? But the deeper undertone of the tick box is as though we're doing it because it is expected, and therefore, what is then the point? That is the deepening perception across the country broadly. If you're looking now beyond managers around, oh, well, people are just doing it for compliance purposes, it's a compliance burden. But when you actually step back objectively and really argue the point that transformation must perform as a system, which means it must have goals, it must have objectives within the business as well, and so is government as well. So where we're going, how we perform after a year, that's why there's financial reports, there's annual reports of an organization, so that its stakeholders can see where its money has gone into, its resources, and ask questions based on its performance. So with transformation, it has not fully sank in across yet in the country that it's actually a system that must also perform in such a same way. And that's why in some listed companies, you then get reports on transformation alone to see how they've transformed. Right. Then the other piece that comes in around that from a monitoring and evaluation perspective is, in the annual report, does it correlate with the B certificate? Now we've seen gaps there as well to say some organizations, when they say B ownership is sitting at X amount, then when you look at the annual report, there's no proper correlation. So again, then that opens up the issue of monitoring evaluation, of governance, of transformation, the verification agencies. What exactly are they doing? Let's zoom into that space as well, because we also know some people take advantage of the system because there's gaps. Yeah. And so this has come out in terms of there is a governance challenge across the board, and people have lost faith and trust in the system, but it can be tightened.
Overall, man, on the positive cohort, if you look at those guys and you're speaking to them who says there's some positivity here, are they finding that the policy has fulfilled its critical and important objective as it was set out?
And so I guess that is where, some of the perceptions are separating. So firstly, as we stated earlier, that it is clear that the policy must be there. It's important. There's agreement on that. But the challenge now is, where's the real impact? And so that's where the tick box issue comes in. That's where, the corruption, the fronting issues are coming in. So people have lost some confidence in the system of it. So let's look at the governance areas. Let's look at the deepening stakeholder engagement, multi-stakeholder, in fact, as they called it, multi-stakeholder engagement across the board, to further educate managers and employees as well. And what role do they play as employees of the business when it comes to transformation? Because there are others that have no clue what role they need to play, and they're just there to work and not fully part of the transformation journey of that particular organization. And so it really is some very interesting key things coming out around, the governance issues, expanding skills development as well, that came out quite strongly as well, especially around, developing of black businesses and SMMEs, etc., as we know that they have those specific skills gaps as well. And so we are finding these key and interesting perspectives from managers themselves.
So I say that because you hear a lot of people, when you talk about it, when I say a lot of people, a lot of those who oppose to B-BBEE say, well, it is a scheme to enrich a particular elite
Yeah.
And so it's only them that benefit from this thing. So and then government would push back and say, no, that's not what the policy was intended to do.
Yeah.
So has there been a departure from what the government says, this is what the policy is intended to do, and what has actually transpired?
So firstly, BBBEE is not macroeconomic policy, though it can morph into macroeconomic policy framework, but it is not. It's one of the tools that we're utilizing to transform. It's not the only tool. That's the first thing. Secondly, those that oppose to it, they're raising two things. They're raising the procurement issue, the corruption in procurement, where there's a long queue of black businesses trying to get business from a procurement perspective. Number two, the one that you've mentioned around the ownership issue, that very few people have benefited. Now, another study by Cruther around trying to look at the ownership layer in terms of who has benefited. We have seen not just individuals benefiting from ownership transactions, we're also seeing employee share schemes where employees have benefited. Are you now going to say those employees are politically aligned? No, it's implementing of policy. Standard Bank is one example of how they've actually implemented the employee share schemes, amongst others. There's also the community development side as well in terms of that. There's also trusts that have been part and parcel of the ownership transaction. We're just analyzing the ownership, and there's some numbers that run into the billions, over 300 billion rand from a certain era of the history of our country has been created by value of BEE transactions, and Cruther has done that piece of work, which needs to be analyzed. So when people then come and say, oh, well, it's only those that were politically aligned, they're just referring to the first 10 years or so of BEE transactions. But the evolution of broad-based black economic empowerment, and even hence the broad aspect of empowerment. So not just ownership, right? So there's management control, and that takes us to employment equity and the Commission for Employment Equity in the Department of Labor. Now, when you analyze those numbers, you and I know that we would not be sitting here if it wasn't for affirmative action. So the pushback, from a clarity point of view, what exactly are people really pushing back against when we analyze the history of ownership transactions? Those have benefited not just individuals, but trusts, communities, employees as well. Management control, we've seen movement in corporate. In fact, public sector was the first to fully embrace affirmative action blueprint of 93 of the BMF, and it morphed into that, and we've seen some great leaders come through, middle management, senior management, executives in the public sector as a result of the very same thing that we're driving. Skills development. At some point a few years ago, listed companies spend around 11 billion rand on skills development, and that report is coming from the commission, BEE Commission. Sure. Now the question is, let's follow the money, right? Let's follow the individual, the impact, and that's what the managers are actually saying in this study, to say, what actually is the impact? Let's track, let's have better monitoring mechanism around those things, and those that must be brought to book in terms of corruption, etc., of cheating the actual system, need to be dealt with. There's ESD, right? Now there's massive discussion around the Transformation Fund, and even the new regulations out for comment around that, and the EEIPs, etc., equity equivalent concepts coming through, been there for a while. Then the socioeconomic development. So exactly what is the fundamental pushback? Because what is driving BEE generally, or BBBEE, is three cogs. It's ownership, it's management, it's control. We are moving from that perspective. Those are the three major objectives, that black people must manage the economy, black people must own the economy, black people must control the economy. Then from that perspective, we are developing laws, and we have them now, BBBEE, we need to refine them even more. Are we meeting those objectives, those three objectives, which we should not be phased about? That's the original intent. And so that's where we are as a country now in terms of its evolution.
Let's get to those refinements before we run out of time. I mean, what are the proposals about how you do refine it from here now?
So from here now, in terms of these recommendations, we've already spoken about multi-stakeholder sessions. In terms of engaging internally within organizations, what's the role of employees around transformation and BBBEE and its implementation. Number two, also the stakeholder engagements across, so both government and private sector and business, deepening the engagements around BBBEE and information sharing as well. So share responsibility. In fact, that's coming out there.
Right.
We need to share the responsibility and have deeper collaboration. Already mentioned the expanded skills development as well. Need to invest more into skills in expanding the knowledge base in terms of leaders that are running small enterprises, etc. We need to make that link even more. Maybe just to add on that, the other issue about ESD and ED in particular that we need to think about as a country is that the big businesses that are driving massive revenue, etc. in the country.
By the way, ESD and ED, enterprise development.
Yes.
For somebody who might not understand.
Yes,
what we're talking
and
about.
enterprise development.
Yeah.
Develop your own black competition. Don't develop a black enterprise that's far away in a sector that has no consequence in terms of economic growth and economic development downstream. So if you're looking at especially the sectors that are the backbone, financial services sector is one example.
Yeah.
They should be having a conversation around, let's develop our own black competition in insurance, in banking, in investment bank, commercial banking, etc., all the different facets of that. We should be talking that language because that actually is enterprise development.
Yeah.
You're not just putting financial resources in developing your black competition, but also skills transfer, as it makes more sense because you have people already on a day-to-day that understand the engine of the financial services system or insurance, etc., and then you're developing that black business. So we need to put that on the table even more instead of investing in a completely different sector away from you. So you're removing the challenge of transformation. You're removing it completely from you as well. So we need to challenge this. And in fact, last year there was a Group C in the insurance space who actually mentioned a similar thing to say, we actually need to develop, we need to see more black enterprises in the insurance space. And she said large black insurance enterprises in this industry. Yeah. So she came out and said it, and there was some pushback and that debate kind of mellowed. But the challenge remains that the big corporates, listed companies, develop your own black competition. Yeah. I'll give another example. In the audit space, there is a black audit firm that is being developed that way in partnership with a big audit firm. And they are proud to say what we're talking about, to say we're developing our own black enterprise that is in the audit space, and we're supporting them, not just financially supporting them, etc., accessing markets, accessing clients that they wouldn't access if they were outside of that space.
Lots to cover. But all in all, we appreciate your time, and thank you so much for having joined us
thank you, my brother.
This afternoon. Okay, those are words of black managers saying there is still a lot of room for BBBEE and its refinement for the transformation of our economic policies.